There is a liquid that costs $3 at any hardware store and does what a $5,000 repaint promises. It bonds to oxidized clear coat at a molecular level and rebuilds the surface from the inside out. No sanding, no polishing, no paint booth, no painter. A retired chemist from Ohio used it on a 1986 Corvette that had been sitting in an open field for 11 years. The hood was as white as dry cement, and the fenders were peeling like sunburned skin in long curved strips. He applied 3 coats with a foam brush in his driveway in 40 minutes. 6 years later, the Corvette still shines as if it had just rolled out of the Bowling Green factory. The auto body industry generates more than $48 billion a year in the United States alone. 70% of that revenue comes from aesthetic work, not collision repair, not structural damage, only aesthetic paint restoration. They cannot allow public knowledge to access a $3 bottle that eliminates their most profitable service. They didn't stop recommending it because it failed. They stopped because it worked too well. A solution that restores paint without professional equipment cannot be sold as a service, and what cannot be sold as a service cannot generate recurring revenue. This is the story of the cheapest liquid in automotive history in the $48 billion machine that made sure you never heard of it. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit subscribe and the bell. This is where we open the vaults that billion-dollar industries welded shut. In 1903, a German chemist named Friedrich Ballner was working in a coatings laboratory on the outskirts of Stuttgart. His employer was a railway maintenance company contracted by the Prussian state railway system to protect locomotives from alpine weather. His job was to develop industrial lacquers that could survive freezing rain, summer UV exposure, and the constant vibration of engine panels at high speed. Ballner noticed something peculiar during an experiment with resin compounds diluted in his Stuttgart workshop. When certain acrylic formulations were diluted to an almost watery consistency, they behaved completely differently than traditional brush-applied coatings. Instead of sitting on top of the damaged lacquer like paint or varnish, the liquid seeped into microscopic fractures and hardened from the inside out. He documented the phenomenon in his laboratory diary and named the process capillary resin infiltration. The concept was elegant and the scientific basis solid. Oxidized lacquer develops a network of tiny channels as UV radiation breaks the polymer chains on the surface. Those channels act like capillaries in human tissue, and a liquid thin enough can flow into them by surface tension alone. If that liquid contains a resin that cross-links as it dries, it fills the fractures permanently and restores the structural integrity of the entire coating. The railway company immediately tested it on a Class P8 locomotive that had been running exposed alpine routes for 9 brutal winters. The original Prussian red lacquer on the engine cover had faded to a dull, chalky orange, with deep fractures visible under magnification on every steel panel. After 2 applications of the diluted acrylic resin spread by hand with cotton rags, the cover completely recovered its original depth and shine. The railway company documented the restoration with photographs that still exist in the Deutsche Bahn Historical Archive in the city of Nuremberg. But here is where the story takes a much darker turn. Friedrich Ballner did not work for the auto industry. He worked for the railroad, and railroads operate under a fundamentally different economic model than car manufacturers. Railroads do not want to repaint entire locomotives. They want to restore existing coatings because repainting costs a fortune in labor and operational downtime. Restoration saves money. Therefore, the European railway system enthusiastically adopted capillary resin infiltration across the continent. But when the auto industry exploded in the United States in the 1920s, paint technology took a completely different direction. Henry Ford famously declared, "You could have any color as long as it was black." That black paint was a nitrocellulose lacquer formulated specifically for speed on the assembly line, not for durability in the sun. It dried fast and looked flawless leaving the factory, but it inevitably degraded after 3 to 5 years of exposure to the elements. The auto industry did not see this degradation as a failure. They saw it as a feature built into the skin of every vehicle that left the factory gates. A car whose paint degrades every few years is a car that needs a professional repaint in a body shop. Professional repainting is a service that generates revenue, and revenue builds an industry. Permanent solutions generate a one-time payment that cannot sustain a franchise empire. By 1952, the American auto body industry had standardized a refinishing workflow that has barely changed in over 70 years. Sand the old paint down to bare metal with progressively finer grit sandpaper on an orbital sander. Prime the exposed metal with a corrosion-resistant primer coat applied in a ventilated booth. Apply 3 to 5 coats of base color in a climate-controlled paint booth with filtered air circulation. Seal everything with 2 coats of clear urethane and then bake or air cure depending on the equipment available in the shop. That process requires between 8 and 40 hours of labor, depending on the size of the vehicle and the scope of the surface damage. The average cost today ranges between $500 and $5,000 for a complete exterior repaint at a certified shop. Some luxury vehicles with multi-stage pearl or metallic finishes can cost $8,000 or more at dealership service centers. Meanwhile, the principle that Friedrich Ballner discovered in a Stuttgart laboratory in 1903 still works perfectly on modern automotive clear coats. Modern polymer chemistry has only made the compounds cheaper and more accessible to anyone with a foam applicator pad and a clean cloth. The active compound behind this restoration is a mixture of acrylic copolymer resin suspended in a volatile solvent carrier. When applied to oxidized car paint, the solvent opens the microscopic pores of the damaged clear coat. The resin molecules flow into those pores driven by capillary action and surface tension, exactly as Ballner described more than a century ago. As the solvent evaporates over the next 12 to 48 hours, the resin molecules cross-link with each other and with the remaining polymer chains of the original clear coat. It does not stay on the surface like wax. It does not fill scratches temporarily like silicone polish. It becomes part of the surface, molecularly bonded, permanently. The result is a restored clear coat that is chemically fused with the original pigment layer underneath. It is not a coating that sits on top. It is a structural restoration at the polymer level. And you can buy everything you need at any hardware store for less than $3. Stay with me because what the auto body industry did to suppress this knowledge is where the real money trail begins. This video is only the first layer we are peeling back. I have compiled everything the auto industry, the paint industry, and the outdoor equipment industry have buried for decades in one place. Everything inside the complete forbidden vault, a step-by-step guide to building a biosand water filter that purifies contaminated river water for less than $10 in hardware store materials. Military-grade fire techniques that the camping equipment industry reclassified as dangerous to protect annual, multi-million-dollar portable stove sales. The blueprint for the earth battery that generates free electricity from nothing but dirt, scraps of copper wire, and galvanized nails from the hardware aisle. Emergency shelter designs that cost nothing to build and outperform $300 tents in independent field tests conducted under mountain conditions. A complete rainwater harvesting system that eliminates your water bill using only hardware store parts and the force of gravity. The off-grid solar setup guide that utility companies have been quietly lobbying platforms to remove from circulation. Blueprints for wood gas generators that powered civilian vehicles in occupied Europe during World War II and still work in modern engines today. And the complete paint restoration protocol from this very video with exact product names, mixing ratios, application steps, and purchase links. More than 12 guides in a single vault, no filler, no fluff, straight to the knowledge they spent billions making you forget. The link is in the description, but don't go away. This video has only just begun, and the science behind this $3 liquid is even more damning than the history. A landmark study published in the Journal of Coatings Technology in 2003 tested acrylic resin penetration on artificially weathered automotive panels. Researchers at the University of Southern Mississippi exposed 20 identical steel panels coated with standard automotive clear coat to concentrated UV radiation, calibrated to simulate 8 years of direct Gulf Coast sunlight. Each of the panels developed stage 3 oxidation, the classification in which paint appears completely white and chalky to the naked eye with surface fractures visible throughout the coating. The researchers applied a single coat of diluted acrylic copolymer resin to 10 panels using a standard foam applicator pad. The other 10 received treatment with a leading commercial polishing compound sold in auto parts stores across the country. After 72 hours of curing, The resin-treated panels showed a gloss recovery of 87% of the original factory reflectance values, an 87% gloss recovery with a single coat of a liquid that cost cents per square meter of painted surface. The panels treated with the commercial polishing compound recovered only 34% of their original gloss under the same measurement conditions. 6 months into the test, the polishing compound panels had lost their recovery entirely and returned to full Stage 3 oxidation as if they had never been treated. The resin-treated panels maintained their restored finish throughout the 36-month duration of the study, with zero measurable degradation on any of the panels. The researchers concluded that capillary resin infiltration represented a fundamentally superior restoration pathway compared to all abrasive correction methods tested in the laboratory. The study was published in a peer-reviewed journal and cited 14 times in subsequent coatings research, and it was totally and absolutely ignored by all major auto body chains in North America. If you have made it this far, you already understand more about automotive paint chemistry than 99% of car owners on this planet, and that is exactly what the body shop industry is terrified of. An informed customer is a customer who never walks through their doors again. Subscribe and share this with every car owner you know who has been quoted thousands of dollars for an aesthetic paint job they could fix in their own driveway. Everything the industry buried is inside the complete vault. The link is in the description. Now stay with me, because the conspiracy behind this $3 liquid is worth even more than the technique itself. An independent study conducted at the Fraunhofer Institute for Manufacturing Technology in Germany in 2009 confirmed these results on a much larger and more practical scale. German researchers tested acrylic resin formulations not on laboratory panels, but on an actual fleet of commercial delivery vehicles. They were work trucks and service vans with between 5 and 12 years of continuous exposure to the elements in the harsh climate of Northern Europe. The vehicles had endured winters with freezing rain and ice, and summers with direct UV bombardment baking the sheet metal roofs and hoods for months. All vehicles in the fleet showed significant oxidation, and several showed clear coat failure so severe that the gray primer underneath was visible through the remaining paint layer. The Fraunhofer team applied 2 coats of diluted acrylic copolymer resin using standard foam rollers on each exterior panel of every vehicle in the test group. The results confirmed exactly what Friedrich Ballner observed on that locomotive cover more than a century ago in his Stuttgart laboratory. The resin penetrated the damaged clear coat via capillary action and bonded permanently to the underlying pigment layer without the need for any mechanical abrasion. An 81% average gloss recovery across the entire fleet of vehicles. Permanent molecular bonding. No need for reapplication after 3 full years of continuous exposure to the elements. The Fraunhofer team calculated the material cost at approximately $2 per square meter of painted surface. A standard sedan has about 8 square meters of total painted exterior surface, which puts the total vehicle restoration cost at approximately $16 total, less than $20. Compare that to the $1,500 minimum in a professional shop in the same country for the same level of aesthetic paint correction. The price difference is not only unfavorable for the industry, it is an existential threat to their entire business model. So why is this not public knowledge? Why does every mechanic, every shop, every dealership service advisor continue to recommend a complete repaint as soon as the paint shows oxidation? The answer is hidden in plain sight within the earnings reports of the 3 largest body shop chains operating in North America today. Mako alone operates more than 450 franchises in the United States and Canada, processing hundreds of thousands of vehicles a year. Their budget paint package starts at about $500, and their premium packages range from $1,500 to $3,000 per vehicle, depending on size and finish. The collision repair and body refinishing industry in North America generated $48.6 billion in total revenue in 2023 alone. That figure has grown every year over the last decade without a single year of decline in the entire reporting period. But here is the detail buried in those earnings reports that should infuriate every car owner. Industry analysts estimate that between 25% and 35% of total body shop revenue comes from purely aesthetic refinishing work. Not accident repairs from collisions, not insurance claims for hail damage, not structural damage requiring welding. Pure aesthetic paint restoration for oxidation, color loss, and surface scratches. That means between $12 billion and $17 billion a year flows through the doors of shops across North America specifically for a problem that a $3 bottle of resin from a hardware store solves permanently. $12 billion a year for a problem with a $3 solution that anyone can apply in their driveway in 90 minutes. You cannot patent a diluted acrylic resin formulation. The base chemistry has been in the public domain since the 1950s. You cannot create a subscription model around a product that the customer only needs to apply once in the entire lifespan of their vehicle. You cannot generate recurring service visits when the restoration is permanent and the customer never returns. You cannot build a 400-location franchise empire on a solution that the customer applies at home with a foam pad and a microfiber cloth. The entire revenue model of body shops depends on automotive paint being temporary. It depends on the clear coat failing predictably every few years. It depends on oxidation returning season after season, and on the customer believing that professional spray equipment and technical training are absolutely necessary for any aesthetic correction. A $3 liquid that anyone can apply at home represents everything that $12 billion business model fights against. It is cheap. It is permanent. It requires no skill, no equipment, no appointment, and no intermediary between the customer and the solution. Therefore, it had to disappear completely from the conversation. Not through bans or laws, but through something much more effective. The body shop industry simply never mentioned it. Not in any technician training manuals, not in any trade publications, nor in any guides or recommendations aimed at consumers. They trained generations of shop technicians exclusively in abrasive correction methods that physically wear down the damaged surface layer instead of restoring it from the inside. They filled auto parts store shelves with polishing compounds designed to provide a temporary shine that degrades within weeks of application to the elements. They created and reinforced the myth that oxidized paint is dead paint and that once the clear coat begins to fail, the only option is to strip the entire surface and start over from bare metal. That myth is worth $12 billion a year in revenue in the North American market alone. And they protect it not with lawsuits or lobbyists, but with something much simpler and more effective: absolute institutional silence. The most profitable lies in any industry are always the ones nobody needs to say out loud. The compounds currently sold as paint restorers and oxidation removers in big box auto parts stores are mostly petroleum distillates mixed with mild abrasives and silicone fillers. They work by physically wearing away a thin layer of the damaged clear coat surface and filling the remaining scratches with silicone polymers that sit on top. The result looks impressive in the parking lot for about 2 to 4 weeks. Then the silicone is washed away by rain or breaks down under UV sunlight exposure. The customer watches their paint fade right back to the same chalky white finish and reaches the obvious conclusion that paint restoration simply does not work. That conclusion leads them straight to the body shop every time, without fail. And the shop waits for them with a $2,000 quote and a 3-day turnaround. This is not an accident. It is a designed failure loop built into the product formulation itself to funnel disappointed customers toward professional services. Now, this is exactly what you should do with this knowledge. Go to any hardware store and head to the adhesives and sealants aisle near the concrete and masonry products. Look for acrylic copolymer resin sold as a concrete sealer or clear acrylic coating, and read the label carefully to confirm that the main ingredient is acrylic copolymer resin or acrylic polymer emulsion. Avoid any product that lists silicone, wax, petroleum distillates, or UV inhibitors as primary ingredients. The jug should cost between $2 and $4 for a quart. Start by washing the vehicle thoroughly with common dish soap, like Dawn, not car shampoo, because dish soap strips away any existing wax or silicone and leaves the oxidized paint bare and ready for treatment. Dry the vehicle completely with clean, lint-free towels, because any remaining water under the resin will prevent a proper molecular bond with the clear coat. Pour a small amount of the acrylic resin directly onto a clean foam applicator pad and apply it to one panel at a time using straight, overlapping strokes from edge to edge. The liquid will look milky white as you spread it across the oxidized surface, which is completely normal because it means the solvent is actively opening the microscopic pores of the damaged clear coat. Let the applied resin sit for 15 to 20 minutes until it dries into a thin white haze over the panel surface. Next, remove the haze with a clean, dry microfiber cloth, applying light to moderate pressure, and you will see the original factory color reappear under the cloth as you work. Apply a second coat following exactly the same process. Wait 15 to 20 minutes for the haze to form. Buff it with a clean section of the microfiber cloth. For heavily oxidized panels with visible chalking or peeling of the clear coat at the edges, apply a third coat after the second has fully cured for 24 hours. Once the last coat cures without interruption for a full 48 hours, the surface will have a deep and permanent shine that is chemically bonded to the original paint structure. Total material cost for a full-size sedan, approximately $3 to $4. Total time, about 90 minutes of application work spread over 2 days of curing. Compare that to 3 days in a body shop parking lot and $2,000 disappearing from your bank account for the same aesthetic result. A retired teacher from Michigan documented this entire process on a 2001 Ford Explorer with 13 years of sun damage parked in her suburban driveway. The roof had turned completely white, and the hood was rough to the touch with the clear coat visibly peeling at every edge and body crease. She applied 2 coats of hardware store acrylic resin during a single weekend using nothing but a foam brush and a pack of microfiber towels from a dollar store. 4 years later, she posted an updated photo on an automotive forum, and the paint still maintained all the original shine without any visible degradation anywhere on the vehicle. Her total cost was $3.19. The shop in town had quoted her $2,200 for the same vehicle with the same damage. The paint industry did not lose this knowledge. They chose to bury it under decades of marketing campaigns and deliberate consumer deception. They taught generations of car owners that oxidation means death, that chalking means replacement, that faded paint means finished paint. None of it is true, not a single word. The molecular structure of car paint does not collapse under oxidation, it fractures. The clear coat develops microscopic channels as ultraviolet radiation breaks the polymer chains at the outermost surface. And those channels can be refilled, sealed, and recovered with the right chemistry. The science has been published in peer-reviewed journals. The compounds have been commercially available in hardware stores for over a century. But a permanent solution that costs $3 cannot peacefully coexist with a $12 billion annual service industry that depends on your ignorance to survive. So they buried the research in obscure journals, ignored the studies in trade magazines, and trained an entire generation to believe that the only answer is to sand it all off and start again from bare metal. We did not forget this technique. It was hidden from us deliberately by an industry that profits when you believe your car needs their hands. But buried knowledge does not disappear. It waits in old chemistry journals, on dusty university shelves, and in railway archives behind institutional doors. If this story has changed the way you look at the faded machines in your driveway, please subscribe and like the channel. We are excavating the history they tried to bury. Plant the seeds of the future. The next vault will open soon, and what is inside will make this one look like just a warm-up.